Welcome to episode 397 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. Joining me in a moment is the CEO of DHL eCommerce Americas, Scott Ashbaugh. We're going to talk about DHL eCommerce's historic new deal with the US Postal Service. Joining me on the line is Scott Ashbaugh. Scott is CEO of DHL eCommerce Americas. Scott, we're going to get into some very exciting news from DHL eCommerce Americas soon to do with the deal with USPS and various other bits and pieces. But before we get into that, just for some of our listeners who might not be as familiar with how DHL eCommerce works, the work that you do there, tell us a little bit about the company, the focus that you have as an organization.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Ian. So DHL eCommerce is one of 5 business divisions of DHL Group. So DHL Group, based in Bonn, Germany. The first thing everybody thinks of is the yellow planes and trucks running around, and that is DHL Express. So that is your time-definite international. It must get somewhere across the world tomorrow. High urgent shipments. There's also an air freight, ocean freight brokerage, DHL Global Forwarding. There's contract logistics with DHL Supply Chain. There is the Deutsche Post, so the incumbent postal service for the German market. And then the youngest is DHL eCommerce. And DHL eCommerce, there is a far greater focus on domestic B2C delivery. So that's what we are here in the US. We've been actually a part of the parent organization now for 20 years or so, but haven't done the best job marketing, I would say. So we're getting a bit louder here in the last 18 months or so. So yeah, we do really mid-sized, larger customers. So think, retail, nutraceuticals kind of thing. And so mid-sized, large shippers, and your traditional B2C delivery. So I'd say maybe 1 in 20 packages that you order here in the US arrives via our service.
And do you have an e-commerce fulfillment aspect of your business as well in the Americas?
We do not. The fulfillment operation and organization is run by DHL Supply Chain. So they'll do your large built-to-suits for the well-known brands. They've also gotten recently into the space of multi-tenant fulfillment, which is quite common here in the US.
Well, let's move on then to the big news recently. And there was a big figure attached to it, which was the deal with the US Postal Service. And the figure was $10 billion, which is a number too large for someone as simple as I to understand. Can you start by explaining what the deal is for and what does it actually cover, the deal that you've signed with the US Postal Service?
Sure. So the model here at DHL eCommerce is that we will pick up from your medium, large size shipper. We will run it through one of our 18 hubs, domestic hubs here in the US. To sort it, we will fly it, truck it across the country. We will resort it, and we will then send it along to the US Postal Service for them to do the final mile of that delivery. And that's really the impetus of the big announcement, is confirming that model for the longer term and on a very large scale. So that's really what the service is. The $10 billion is for the contracted last mile service that the US Postal Service offers.
And this is building upon a historical agreement, if I understand. Is that correct?
That's right. We've been doing the same model for about 25 years in one form or the other. In the very early days, it was credit card statements and various forms of flat letter mail, and that evolved over time into parcels. And the service that the USPS offers is called Parcel Select. That's the name of the product for downstream access workshare that we entertain. And that has been traditionally a 1 year at a time. The published rates change and you follow suit. So the difference here now is a longer term agreement, and sort of each year you get your rates in October for the next year. So instead, we have a longer term deal that gives us more certainty of what the future looks like much further in the future.
And you mentioned that this is the Parcel Select product. So for those of us outside the US, can you just explain in a sort of a more practical sense how that works? How the parcels are handed over to the USPS and at what level, whether it's national, state, really how does that managed?
Yeah, there is the option for different levels of, say, injection into the USPS. So really anyone could get a Parcel Select contract and integration and pay essentially published rates and inject into the very upstream hubs of the USPS. I believe there's about 20 or so, or go further downstream. They used to be called NDCs, National Distribution Centers, but now they're called LPCs, so local processing centers, but essentially kind of a mid-level hub. And you've got about 150 of those currently in the US. Or you can go further downstream into the destination delivery units, DDUs. And that's your local neighborhood post office. There's about 25,000 of them in the US. And so there's different rates for different levels of integration. In the past 18 months, 2 years, we've been operating more at that middle tier, so the LPC injection. And that was really by design of the last Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy. He's changing the way the USPS network operates, and he wanted more of workshare partners to integrate at that level. Previously, we were all very focused on going downstream into the DDUs. So 2 years ago, we were going to about 11,000 DDUs, destination delivery units, every day, covering about 90% of the population via that channel. But we did make that change about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, and moved upstream into the LPC. So that's where we are now. The agreement we have with the USPS is, I'd say, primarily focused around that level because that's what they're designing for. But the important point in the way that we're working with USPS is really locked arm partnerships. So when we see opportunities where it makes sense for both of us to change that, find DDUs where we should be injecting, because let's say maybe there's a pinch point at some of the LPCs, we'll sort of agree on that and make the adjustment to fine tune the operation. So it's, yeah, very much kind of working in harmony how we get the best end to end setup. There's another layer of integration as well. The colloquial term was the mega DDUs. So they're actually called SNDCs, so sorting delivery centers. These are very large DDUs with 50, 60 routes being dispatched from them directly. So there's about 2% of the volume we're going into today there. But I think that's going to expand as the USPS expands that type of network node.
And we hear that just how competitive the US delivery market is at the moment. Lots of new players coming in, lots of big players involved as well. So what makes the US Postal Service a good partner, a good fit for DHL e-commerce?
Yeah, this is one that we really studied carefully in that 2 year ago timeframe. So we had the shock, the need to change how we integrate and the rates that were associated with that. And that really made us think, okay, so that was a little scary. That was a big change to our entire operation all at once. And we felt quite beholden, I guess, to the USPS, like that they could kind of wipe us out in a whim. And we said, okay, that's not great. What should we do? Do we look at building some of these gig economy type models, right, and bringing in our own drivers? Do we buy some of the entities that are out there doing that business? Because some of them had already 2 years ago started a foothold in the market and started gaining steam. Do we subcontract them? Do we kind of subcontract all of them and sort of cherry pick who's the best in any one zip code? Or do we go kind of double down with USPS because they are at every house every day, no matter what? And we studied that problem up, down, sideways, short-term effects, long-term effects. And in the end, we came to this understanding or belief that by law, with the universal service obligation, the USPS is at every house every day, no matter what. And in the end, any other model is putting a new vehicle in the neighborhoods and on the roads. And if you're an alien and you kind of descend upon Earth and you come zoom in on the US and you look at the parcel deliveries that are taking place around here, and you see 5 different trucks running around in the neighborhoods, right? What are you guys doing? That makes no sense whatsoever. It should really just be one. And so our decision was the group that's trained, that's woven into the fabric of the neighborhoods here. Like I know my postal delivery by first name. He was buying lemonade 2 weekends ago for my daughter's lemonade stand. So it's a very kind of like wholesome integration with the neighborhoods. It is a single vehicle that's going to be there anyway. It is the most efficient model, period. Essentially incremental cost of near zero. So then what it takes is making sure that the arrangement, the commercial arrangement with the USPS is structured such that it makes sense and can be competitive out in the market. So we took that stance that like from a first principles view, that's the right way. And now it's a matter of managing politics and P&Ls and everything else to make sure that the right way is built into the way that we operate. So that's what we focused on for 18 months or so, was structuring this deal and making sure that it makes sense for the USPS, who they've got their financial challenges as well, and so we need to make sure that it's good for them and that is then also good and competitive in the external market. So that's really how we came to it, and we did study every other model up, down, sideways.
And you've mentioned some of those models in passing there, the gig economy and the consolidation of some of the regional carriers in the US and things like that. So let's just continue on that a little bit. Let's talk about the future of the US parcel market. I mean, this is a long-term commitment. So what does the agreement tell us about the future of the US parcel market when it comes to all of those models? When it comes to, what's the right way of putting it? Basically guaranteeing delivery, having consistency of delivery, because our customers, the recipients, are very demanding, aren't they? So what can we glean from all of this?
I think I can't say where the future is going to go. Every time I try to predict, we have a black swan event, totally wipes me out in terms of accuracy. The gig model in particular, they need scale to be effective. And even then, at some point, that's going to plateau where more parcels is going to just mean more drivers and more Toyota Camrys and such. So there won't be efficiencies to be gained past a certain point, particularly with vehicles that just aren't designed for residential delivery. So at the same time, there's a lot of investor money to burn along the way. And a lot of folks are very interested in being involved in the last mile market in the US. So I can't say how long they continue to sort of fund the expansion of this and whether consolidation will fix their problem or not. So we have speculations. We did our own modeling of what this needs to look like, and we didn't really see a point where they turn the corner and become stable, at least not in the U.S. market. I think in other regions, it's maybe more viable. We see that actually working quite well in the UK and Netherlands and other places. But the US is so vast, just geographically and spread. It's going to be very difficult. There's always going to be a 30-40% of the population that's very, very difficult to reach efficiently without incredible scale. So I think the USPS is going to retain an edge for a long time with that universal service obligation that really, some could consider it a painful element of their existence, but I really think they are starting to learn how to use that to their advantage. And that's really what's going to be important for the long term.
I agree with you in that. That aspect of any postal services mandate is, in some respects, a unique selling point. We visit every address in the country, or 98% or whatever it might be, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. Anyway, nobody wants to hear me rabbit on about this, and I can talk about that under wet cement for a long time. Let's just continuing though our discussion about the US parcel market. We seem to be reading a lot in the media about more of the more bulky parcels going through delivery networks, even the furniture and home furnishings and outdoor stuff. We've gone from just buying shoes online or buying books online to more. What are you seeing? Are you seeing more of those heavier parcels going through your network?
Our network's designed a bit more specifically for the, let's say, 5 kilos, 10 pounds and below range. So I think when it gets out of that spec, we're not a great option. Technically, we could go to 25 pounds, but even that's going to be handled off the core automation and manually. And it takes a different kind of floor space setup and operational process to do that well. So that's not that one that we've attracted that business, nor do we want to really. And has it increased? I've seen, like you said, reporting that it has, but it's kind of a custom operation that it's probably better suited to others.
So just on that, the profile of the parcels that we're seeing in the industry and the profile of the parcels that DHL eCommerce Americas is handling. So what are you seeing there? Are you expanding a little bit more away from just the lightweight? You mentioned you're not really going to be handling the large ones. What's the profile of parcels you're handling these days?
That's right. I mentioned before that in our long history, we started off with credit card statements and these kind of things. And actually the origins of the backbone of the network was around extremely lightweight parcels. So we started with things like cell phone cases and other really small items. And that worked for a long time. That became a bit of brand for us in a way. We were known for those light packages and we were the group to go to when you have that need. But as our arrangement with the USPS has changed, and particularly around this big new deal we have with them, we are going to be shifting, I don't say shifting, but adding competitiveness in slightly larger parcels. So let's say, less than 10 pounds or so. So really with a sweet spot, there's a lot of volume in the 2 and 3 pound range. And we are particularly effective in that segment there.
Now, you mentioned technology there, and that's one thing I wanted to quickly ask you about before we wrap up, and that's a bit about the role that automation plays and technology plays in your setup, in DHL e-commerce's sorting centers and distribution network. Tell us a little bit about that, what you're doing there, and I'm going to say it, everybody, are you using AI? And if so, what's the role that AI plays in your logistics and your decision making?
So maybe starting with just the core automation, I think that's been no news for anybody for the last 15, 20 years. So everyone's been using various forms of cross-belt sorters and tilt trays and shoe sorters and that kind of thing. And so we are still doing that on a large scale. So we have 3 different tiers of types of automation we use depending on the throughput that we need. One point I would note, kind of interesting, is what we learned through COVID and the change that we've made in how we think about automating our hubs now. And that is around the importance of flexibility and scalability on the fly. Before COVID, we were building out equipment that was based on a predicted amount of volume over time. And so we'd spend, many double-digit millions building out these large-scale hubs. And in many cases, we're like, oh man, we've already blown it out. Like we're already at capacity. And we didn't design it such that you could add layers of belts, all right, or band out sideways. So one thing we've taken a real notice of is that we can't predict the future. And it's probably worth sacrificing a small amount of efficiency for what would be a certain prediction on volume and instead allow for more scalability, because that volume profile will look different in the future than what we thought it was. Having the ability to adjust the number of sorters or the throughput and the number of drops and all that kind of thing is far more valuable than we realized previously. So I think that's one major shift we made. Talking about AI and such, I think like every company, probably on the planet right now, we're certainly using it now to support particularly back office functions. So things like customer service and contract reviews and pricing algorithms, that kind of thing. In terms of the core operation, I would say it's being used selectively. So let's say powering vision with robotic arms that are picking individual pieces out of a pile and learning in this particular scenario, when the pile looks like just like this, you're going to want to grab the piece that way. And we even had a problem in the early days of training it where it was doing that kind of deductively. So it would see a scenario, fail, and say, I'm not going to try that again when I see that scenario. And then after a while, it just quit. It was like, I've seen all these scenarios and I failed every time, so I just don't go. And someone would have to come with a hockey stick and stir up the pile to make it look a little different so it would get going again. But we've evolved, I think, past that. That was years ago. And they're starting to get pretty good, pretty fast. They're not as fast as humans yet, but they are stable. So when you have kind of daytime, say low priority shifts operating, those robotic arms with the AI driven vision are quite good for kind of slow and steady wins the race type production. But when you're at the critical hours at night for the products that have a bit of a faster speed to them and they need to be in and out, within a couple hours, we still need to supplement with humans to really maximize the throughput of the full hub. So that's that piece. I don't see in the near term the AI really taking over the network brain of how the cross docks work and how the hubs are connected. It does support in scenario analysis ahead of time, but it's never going to, well, I'll say never. At the moment, it can't really take over and make the decisions on the fly just because there's too many other dependencies downstream. So you've got trucks and drivers with schedules that they're used to, and they need a lead time to make an adjustment. And you've got people still working in the hubs with shifts where if you're going to change how they operate, it needs to be with some lead time. So currently things are done with a bit of planning ahead to be able to actually implement. The value of the AI would seemingly be to just make a different shift schedule each day depending on the volume of that day. It's just not a reality in terms of how the business has to operate. So maybe when the buildings are dark and there's nobody in there and the machines have fully taken over, and when the trucks themselves are fully autonomous, maybe at that point There'll be kind of more of a hands-off, let the automation side, the network configuration, but that's a little ways out.
There's also a broader question here about availability of workforce and all those sorts of things, but we don't have time to get into all that today. Everybody will be pleased to know. One last question though before we wrap it up. I understand that DHL eCommerce has been entering into some partnerships with universities and things like that, working on, my notes say, industrial engineering. What's all that mean? What's it all about?
Yeah, so part of our longer term strategy is just to make sure that we have really the best talent possible in the organization. And one thing we found is that we were really kind of tapping out the best talent currently. And that was limiting the amount of new innovation and business improvements we could do. Yeah, I picked a few universities, Georgia Tech being one, to really bring in a new wave of talent and brains and get them coached across different parts of the business so that we can then continue to really promote from within. So we're kind of not in the mode where we want to go hire a 25-year veteran in some particular instance of the business. We'd much rather bring up our own folks, but that means you need to bring quite a wide breadth of young ones at the early stages. So we're doing much more of that. Really is a long-term strategy to build a nice pyramid of upward mobility for our team.
Scott Ashbaugh, CEO of DHL eCommerce Americas, thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Ian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Kate Muth from iMag is going to talk about fees and EU and delivery. You know the one I'm talking about. Phil Sandbrook from Zebra is going to talk about success in the middle mile and the last mile, what technology has to do with all of that. Helene Buldale-Rye returns. She's going to talk about some of her latest research relating to e-commerce returns. Don't miss any of these great interviews, podcasts, etc. Subscribe to the Postal Hub podcast in the podcast platform of your choosing, be it Amazon Music, whatever it's called, something like that, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of them. They're all great. Subscribe in one, some, or all of them, and listen to the podcast wherever you want. When you're out walking the dog, walking someone else's dog, I don't know, whatever you do to float your boat. What else? Remember that you can subscribe to any one of my great email newsletters that are out there. There's the Daily Delivery Digest, there's the Post Office Digest, which is only monthly, but it's got lots of great stuff in there. If you love your post offices, retail outlets, all that sort of stuff. What else do I do? Oh, look, just follow me on LinkedIn, and that way you'll find out all about it. Search for me on LinkedIn. You don't even have to connect with me these days. If you're too shy to connect, you can just follow, and you get all my LinkedIn goodness in your feed instead of the AI-generated slop that's out there at the moment. Not pointing fingers at anybody, but they know who they are. If you want to email me about anything at all, my email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.